Hello, and welcome to a very special edition of the Hackaday Podcast. I'm Managing Editor Tom Nardi, and today I'm joined by a pang of loneliness in the shape and size of one Mr. Elliot Williams, who's currently taking some well-deserved vacation time. You know, I've often heard it said that you don't truly appreciate the things you have until they're gone. And now that Elliot has been gone for just about 2 weeks, I think we've all got a newfound respect for just how much he does behind the scenes to keep the Hackaday machine running. And, I'm not saying this only because I assume he'll listen to this episode of the podcast and probably hear it, but I think that wherever you are, you should take a second to give Elliot a quick round of applause for everything he does for us. Unless you're driving or something, in which case, like one solid jazz hand should do it. Now, what listeners may not realize is that Elliot is the heart and soul of the Hackaday Podcast. He handles everything from blocking out what subjects we're going to talk about to the final editing and mastering process. To be fair, this has allowed the podcast to retain its distinctive sound and feel, even as his co-hosts rotate out. The downside, of course, is that once Elliot decides to go visit his folks for a couple of weeks, everything grinds to a halt. Rather than attempting to bungle our way through the process without him, we originally just weren't going to run a podcast at all this week. But as luck would have it, Jenny List was heading out to EMF Camp right around the same time that Elliot was leaving. And with very little advance warning, seriously, I think she had less than 24 hours before she was due to get on a train, she agreed to be our roving reporter and grab some on-location audio while she was there for this special edition of the podcast. For those of us in the States who will likely never get a chance to attend one of these European hacker camps, it's a unique opportunity to be a fly on the wall. Jenny came through for us in a big way and got several people to sit down for a chat, and we really can't thank her enough. That said, an outdoor festival isn't exactly the best place to try and record a thoughtful interview, so you'll have to excuse the occasional gust of wind or droning techno beat in the background. While her interviews do make up the bulk of this week's episode, this did seem like a fun time to play with the podcast formula a bit. So stay tuned afterwards for a special guest host edition of Quick Hacks, and you may want to dust off your Little Orphan Annie decoder ring, as rumor has it there could be a hidden message waiting for members of the Wrencher's secret circle before we wrap things up. And now, coming direct from the bohemian paradise of EMF Camp, let's start things off with a one-on-one chat with the madcap musician known throughout the tubes as Look Mum, No Computer.
Good to see you at EMF Camp.
Good to see you too.
And you're playing a gig later this evening. What have you brought, first of all?
Well, it all didn't go completely to plan today, I must be honest. A bit of a miscommunication with the van rental place about the bank holiday and having to pick it up yesterday, so I had to think on my feet this morning and see what I could fit into the back of a Ford Fiesta.
Nice one. Okay. So no church organs?
Sadly not. This is, funnily enough, as I've been walking around, people have been asking, what have you bought? And everybody's been hoping for something else. I don't think I would be able to physically bring everything. So it's like, have you bought the Megadrone? Have you bought the Game Boy Mega Machine, the Furbies, such like that? But right now I bought a modular synth that I think is best to play music with people, and there's a few Furbies sat in there, and that's about it.
Well, it's always the thing with live performance, you want the thing that will work, don't you?
Yes, yeah.
Now, there's one thing I've noticed of great interest. Obviously, you've posted the videos recently about buying the church organ in Bristol and moving it. Tell us about the museum.
Yeah.
And you had a Strouger exchange.
Oh,
Tell us about everything you've got. We
yeah.
Really want to know this.
Okay, well, the museum's probably my latest project. The concept being that initially when I started building modular synthesizers, which I was mainly into to start with, was I was circuit bending toys, and every time I would circuit bend something, it was its own separate thing. Yeah. And the idea of making something and you kept on adding to it to make it bigger just feel a bit more like you weren't always starting at the bottom again. So I started conjoining circuit bend toys, and then that turned into modular synthesizers, and I've seen the museum as a modular project because whatever you finish, it gets added to it, whether that is a repair or restoration of an old really interesting machine or making your own thingamajiggy. So that's what the museum is. It kind of just had a load of stuff, gathering dust, and it worked out sort of to make sense financially to actually set up a museum. Yeah. It's been a bit of a project to try and get it, but I'm aiming to get it more of a thing, but right now it's a weekend.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah.
No, that sounds absolutely wonderful. I cannot wait to get down there. We're hoping to get down there for a Hackaday feature fairly soon.
Yeah.
So hopefully you, the reader, should see more in time. Is there anything else you want to tell us about?
So, you say about the Strowger. That is something that I got into about 9 or 10 months ago. It just blew my mind. I was making a relays sequencer that was basically 8 D-type flip-flops made from relays.
Okay.
And somebody was like, "Oh, have you seen these step-by-step switches?" I was like, "No, I haven't seen." Nose to me, brand new, and it blew my mind. And I've got the kind of mind, I'm sure, like most people into this kind of stuff, that when you get something, you just can't get your head off it.
You've got to get your hands on one.
You've got to get it.
That, yes.
And then naturally that turned into a bit of an obsession. And then there's a lot of things like that around.
Would you care to give us a URL or something that people can visit? Or,
yes, so
plug the museum.
The museum is it's got an awkward name, but that's part of its charm. It's called This Museum Is Not Obsolete. It's a bit of a mouthful. It's meant to be like that. It's meant to be a bit awkward, but that's the .com. Shove it anywhere and it will turn up, because I don't think there's many other museums with that name. So
no, that's true. That's a good idea. Yeah. Have you got anything coming up that you want to tell us, or are you keeping tight-lipped about it?
I don't keep tight-lipped about many things. To be honest, right now I'm obsessed by the church organ. I've got to be honest.
Oh, wonderful! Yeah.
Sorting about the church organ. So, like you said, I started. So a few years ago, I made the flame throwing organ, which is an organ that's copper, and you blow it, but instead of air going through it, it's butane. And somebody was having a conversation in the museum and be like, "Why don't you put an air compressor through it?" I was like, "Okay, I'll give that a go," but it didn't sound very good. It wasn't the most tuneful, because I made all the pipes. It didn't sound the prettiest. And then I just looked on eBay and found a really cheap church organ. So that's how it happened. Ended up getting a church organ, and it was going to be, I knew it was going to be a daunting task to pull it out of the house, but I didn't realise it was going to be as daunting as it actually turned out to be. It was quite a nightmare, and luckily they had the people who just bought it had an asbestos survey, so no asbestos around there, so just got to town.
I saw the video. I talked to a friend of mine who's worked on organs. Basically, I'm a former church warden, so I've dealt with organs from a professional point of view, and his comment was, "Ooh, he's got his hands full with that one."
Oh, so. yeah. I'm pretty sure I have, and in fact, funnily enough, I got quite a lot of negative emails about it, and more than I've ever received from any other project.
Why?
I don't know. I think there was a lot of people who maybe haven't really seen what I do, and thought, he's gonna ruin that piece of history, and it's gonna be
nobody
not
else
fixed.
would have taken it. It would have been left to be going to scrap, and you've actually saved it.
Yeah, well, who knows? Yeah. But luckily, so that made me quite driven to make it at least be musical within a week. So I just blasted through it, and I crashed the other day because I worked on it solidly to try and prove these people.
No, that's understood. I think we've all overdone it on projects.
Yeah, you do, don't you?
I know you've got a gig to go to in a hurry, but
yeah. Well, not much of a hurry. It's a few hours. I thought I had sound check, but I was wrong.
Okay,
so it's all right.
I could have grabbed you off the street for this.
Yeah. I'm trying to think what I've just it's all a bit of a mess up there. You know how it is when you try and think of the projects that you've got going on, and it's like, I can't remember. It's all gone blank. It's just
no worries.
Just this that. I think I'm going to make. I think next week I'm going to build. So the museum a visitor counter.
Okay.
Out of uni selectors.
Okay.
So 6 uni selectors, 6 Nixie tubes.
Oh,
just
nice.
Nice, quick. Because I was like, I could program something to do it, and then do it with that kind of memory, but then I might lose it. It might disappear. But uni selectors are actually quite a solid way of saving a number. I mean, it's going to be really time consuming, but. That's what I enjoy doing somewhat.
It sounds like Tim Hunkin's got some competition.
Yeah. Oh, I can't beat a bit of Tim Hunkin. Very fortunate to meet him in a couple of last year.
He's
an
definitely
amazing
one of my
fella.
heroes too.
Yeah.
But,
really cool.
No, I'm really looking forward to coming to the museum, and thank you so much for talking to us today.
Well, thanks for chatting.
Well, I'm here in the middle of the site. There's a bunch of trees, and under it there's a delightfully retro, made of twigs dome, and in it I find Alex Nix with a wonderful, it's a musical instrument. It's the Swanee whistle organ. Please tell us more about it.
Yes, well, I've taken ordinary slide whistles and I've motorised them so that they can be played with a MIDI keyboard. Pretty much. We've got a lovely box with we've got a box at the back which has the fan motors in it. I did want it to have bellows. Unfortunately, didn't have time to make it bellow driven. The main reason is that it's very difficult to get the flow rate right. Each whistle, you have to blow very gently for the low notes and then blow much harder for the high notes. So you need good control over the flow rate, which is hard to do with bellows, or you need a lot of them, maybe 2 per whistle.
Yeah, I suppose think about it. That's why church organs have a great big reservoir to even that out. Yes, of course, but you haven't got the space for that. Yes.
I could add it. I just make the box bigger. It does fit in my car, which is a benefit.
Yes, it folds up very nicely. So what have you done? There's a remote control servos with a sort of arm and lever. It's all laser cut ply, isn't it?
It is. So the servos at the bottom are pretty fancy servos. I mean, you can get fancier servos, but these ones, they're these Dynamixel servos. The reason I went for those is that they are out of the box calibrated to fixed angles. So you can
that's useful.
You can tell it 90 degrees and it will be 90 degrees and know that they'll all line up. And they've got a very interesting way of driving them. You have a single wire bus between them, and it's packet based. So I can broadcast to all of them.
That's useful.
And they've got torque measurement and temperature measurement on board, which I'm not even using. The laser cut plywood. The purpose of this arrangement is because at the top of the slide whistle, the notes are very close together, but at the bottom they're further apart. So the idea is, at the bottom you want to be able to move fast. At the top you want fine control. So this functions as a lever to give us that range. And then, the variables are, we've got the servo plunger position, and we've got a fan motor at the back, which is speed controlled, PWM controlled, and then also the one servo at the top, which does the little valves to get us articulation, just because there's so much inertia to the fan motors that we can't...
It just masks off the outlet of the whistle. Oh, that's really clever. Now, I guess, can we demonstrate it? I notice you've got a jukebox on a ThinkPad here. Do you want to play something live? Or
very recent addition is the jukebox. Let's see. Well, we have suffered some damage over the weekend, so
it doesn't matter.
It's one of the whistles is now only partially working, so that's not a problem. So I can control a whistle individually if I just select the MIDI channel for it. So I can select channel 3, gets to speed. You can hear that the pitch depends on the flow rate. This is part of the problem. So it's
we can hear the fan speeding up in the background.
It's definitely very out of tune,
but that doesn't matter.
And so the idea was on channel 5, it will automatically assign polyphony to each whistle. So
that's cool.
And of course it supports pitch bend.
Excellent.
Beautiful.
I love it.
It's a key feature.
I mean, I've seen many musical instruments in my career at Hackaday, but I've never seen motorised slide whistles before.
It's my new niche.
Oh, that's absolutely wonderful. Well, thank you very much for showing us this. It's a fantastic thing to play out. Now, what do I have to do? Do I have to just select a thing? We're going to play out with a bit of, because of course this is Hackday, we're going to play you out with a rickroll.
Is it going to work?
Oh, is it going to work? Can you recognise it?
Not yet. Maybe when we get to the chorus.
Oh, that's it. Excellent.
So out of tune. Probably enough of it.
Well, thank you very much, Alex, for a fantastic instrument and showing us the way around it.
Excellent. No problem at all.
I've come down the hill here at EMF, actually to Null Sector, which is normally incredibly noisy, but ironically we've come here to avoid some of the noise and wind noise. I'm with, in alphabetical order, James Bruden and Matt Denton, who both of you probably know from YouTube and innumerable Hackday articles past. It's really good to see you guys. Can you tell us what stuff you brought today?
Okay, I'll go first. It's Matt here, and I have brought with me my XXL Lego inspired powered go-kart, which is Mark II now, and also one of my giant engines from the latest 5x Lego inspired build. 3D printed this is, of course, and that's just the engine from the Lego car chassis 1980s kit, which will end up being about 2.5 meters long.
Nice one. I've always been rather envious that people who can ride that go-kart, because of course they're too small for me.
Yeah. Well, it's probably too small for me, if I'm honest, but I can just about squeeze into it. It's perfect for my nephew, who it was made for, of course.
Well, of course, very photogenic, as you said in your talk.
Indeed, yes.
By the way, you two have just done a talk. I'm going to link to that in the story below this podcast, so you can go away and watch that. Hopefully, by that time, the event people will have put up the video.
Yep.
Certainly, it was interesting to actually see the quality of the printing up close. That's the advantage of these events. You see something on YouTube, and it looks wonderful on YouTube. Of course, all your stuff looks wonderful on YouTube, but to be able to get up and actually touch it, to be able to see how you did the 3D printing is actually very interesting.
Yeah.
Anyway, James, what have you brought along?
Well, while we're in the Null sector, I've got an installation in a 20-foot container, which is one of my performance robots. I've actually got the spare one in the van because there's two of them. And it's a roughly 7-foot tall robot torso with about 2 kilowatts of motors on it.
Oh, cool.
Which basically I've done an interactive exhibit, which I planned. So I built these things for events in 2019. I did one event ever because of the pandemic. So during the pandemic, I thought, basically I've got these robots with accessible buttons that kids can mash buttons and operate accessible controls to control the robots, because most robot exhibits you're not supposed to touch, right? And then during the pandemic, I thought, when events start again, everyone's going to be really hygiene aware. So let's make it so you don't have to touch it. So I've been experimenting with deep learning models that NVIDIA provide with their Jetson series.
Okay.
So I've got PoseNet running, so you can pose and it tracks your skeleton with the Raspberry Pi camera and you see yourself on a screen, it draws the skeleton over you. And then you can move into poses, and then that sends OSC messages to some DMX software that runs a lighting chase. But the robots are actually controlled by DMX, so instead of controlling lighting, it moves the robots. So the idea is they dance vaguely in the position you pose, so they dance so you don't have to.
Gosh, that's fascinating.
So there's that.
Fascinating.
Then I've got the ball-wheeled robot,
okay.
and I've got OpenDog 3.
Oh, okay. Yes, I saw the OpenDog and the ball-wheeled robot on your little village stand.
Yes.
Are they static exhibits, or have you been running?
I have been running them, and I have made video.
Oh, excellent.
So there'll be a video coming out Tuesday after EMF about being here, mostly testing the ball-wheeled robot on grass, which everyone wanted to see from the last video.
Okay. Oh, yeah, the trouble is this whole site is on a slope. I hope you find yourself just heading down to the lake.
It's easier to go downhill with both the dog and the ball-wheeled robot.
Yes, I can imagine that. And I use DMX for lighting, so I'm very, very interested to see I didn't realise your robot in the container was controlled by DMX. I must go.
So I didn't have to write any software because there's loads of DMX software to control them for performances. So I'm using QLC Plus lighting controller, which interfaces to OSC, ArtNet, MIDI, everything. So when there's not a DJ in the venue like there is here, I also have some PA, and I've got Ableton tied in. So certain motion loops set off Ableton loops of drum bass lines and various bits of things that come in and out as you toggle the functions.
Gosh, that's fascinating. I'm going to have to go away and read up on this, as no doubt quite a lot of our listeners are readers. Have you seen anything else interesting? Have you seen anything else interesting at the event that you think caught your eye?
Well, I always love the Firenado. We sat and watched that the other night. We had a good show of the Firenado. Obviously, Hacky Races, great fun. I was hoping to get my go-kart around that, but unfortunately, I had to make the go-kart off-road capable, so I had to give it more ground clearance. which I did. I then upgraded the motors to cater for the lack of torque with the extra big wheels, which I did.
Yeah.
But it was going really well, and then I hadn't tightened up the belt properly, and I basically stripped my drive belt.
Oh no!
Because there's so much power in the motors
you use
now.
the tooth belts, don't
I
you?
use tooth belts, and it stripped them clean. So I've got elastic bands now, which aren't working very well. So that's a bit disappointing. So I'd like to have gone and done some hacky racing.
Yeah, I think most of them use the smaller version of a bicycle chain.
Yes, they do. Yeah. So I might have to upgrade. I don't know yet. But also that there was like a little walking. Obviously, I like walking robots. With my background, there was a walking machine here, which I haven't seen going yet.
No, I saw it yesterday.
Yes,
that was quite interesting.
That's very impressive. Is it a octopod or a hexapod?
But it sort of works on just a reciprocal motor system, doesn't it? But
yes.
Yeah, I haven't had massive time to look around. We had a really good time here last night in Null Sector.
Null Sector's very impressive this time.
Null Sector, as every event they do an amazing job here.
Yeah.
I'm going to try and interview the Null Sector guy later. So.
Yeah, well you can hear them now. You can hear that thumping bass in the background.
Yeah, no, definitely one of the coolest spots on the world, and it's just for us. We were never the cool kids at school.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I know you're both incredibly busy people, and I really want to thank you for giving me the time for this interview. Do you have any parting words, anything you want us to look at that's coming up from either of you?
So I've got some bigger projects than I've done in the past because I've rented a 1,000 square foot of workshop. So more things like the Bull Wheel and the funny bike that have come out in the last few weeks.
Okay.
So on Tuesday is the tightrope walking cheek device.
Okay. Oh, that's
which
cool.
is a massive reaction wheel on my back.
It may be last Tuesday by the time this goes out, I'll still. I'm sure our readers would love to
go straight away and watch it by then. So.
How about you, Matt?
I would just say go back and check the last video I did with my nephew, which is one of my favourite, which is him getting to drive the go-kart finally, because it's the first time he's driven it with drift rims on.
Oh,
and
nice.
so it's called opposite lock, but he's really good. He's just drifting the whole time and loving it. Yeah.
Suddenly, I want to be a kid again.
Exactly that. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, both of you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the event.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
So I've come down to the other end of the EMF Camp field to a nondescript tent among loads of other tents to find the copper telephone network. And I'm with Matthew Harold, who's the person behind it, the brains of the operation. Can you tell me something about what you're doing here, Matthew?
Yeah, sure. So I've been working in telecoms for 10 years and enjoy communications things as well. So as well as telephones, we play with radio and all kinds of things.
Okay.
So the original plan was I was going to bring, a handful of phones, 4 or 5 phones, plug them in and just show them off. And then I started looking at how to do it. You get these adapters that adapt like a classic pull-style rotary phone to connect with SIP. And I discovered that you could do a similar thing with these Cisco boxes, which support 24 lines in a single box, and they're available reasonably cheaply on eBay secondhand. So then my mind started wandering, and I
These
thought,
are the 19-inch rack things, look a bit like network hubs behind you.
Yes, yeah, they're big metal boxes with lots of flashing lights. So then I sort of planted the seed that if they're available fairly cheaply, maybe we could do it all over the campsite.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And it kind of spiraled out of control there. So the original plan was to just do telephones, plain old telephones, and then faxing, and then dial-up kind of crept in, and then view data as well. And I've ended up bringing like a whole bunch of telephones and computers and all kinds of toys to play with.
Well, we're sitting at a desk covered in telephones. In front of us is a BBC microcomputer that's authoring the view data system, and there's an old GPO 706 classic British telephone. A red telephone. Is it a hotline to the president?
Yeah, it may well be. Yeah.
What are you putting on the view data system?
So this is a system called Telstar, which is like a modern homage to the original Press-Tel system. It's by a gentleman called John Newcomb.
Okay.
And he's put it all together. It's super detailed. He's pulling a lot of information from other APIs. Okay. So you can view things like the weather, latest headlines, financial information from the stock market.
Cool.
He's really put a lot of effort in to try and replicate the appearance and some of the information that was on Press-Tel originally.
Okay.
So it's much like a teletext system, but accessible via a modem or now TCP.
Okay.
And it looks almost identical, but you get the added benefit that you can upload, so you can send stuff back to it. So back in the day, you were able to do online banking and book flights and cinema tickets and stuff.
Yeah. I remember from back in the 80s that Prestel was something that was really cool and was all the magazines, but nobody could afford it. And you went over to France and everybody had Minitel terminals.
Yeah, it just seems like they sort of priced a lot of people out, and it never really got to anywhere close to the size or popularity of Minitel.
Yeah, it's such a shame, really.
It is.
Have you had any people doing other things with it? Are there any telephone controlled things, or anybody done any projects on it?
So I'm in the amateur radio tent, and someone's basically connected a telephone to a radio.
Okay.
Because of various licensing rules, you can only use it if you're a licensed amateur. So there's a password and it's protected. But you can dial a number, and then your call will then be transmitted around the campsite on VHF. So that's probably one of the cool things. And then there's been a lot of faxing going on.
Okay.
We played noughts and crosses with a village down the
nice.
road via fax. It took about half an hour to play one game because it's so slow. But yeah,
I have to say, at NK Makerspace, we were desperately trying to find somebody who had a fax machine, and we couldn't actually find one in time to bring it. But,
they're quite tricky to get hold of now.
Yeah, not so many around.
Yeah.
And are you running a dial-up ISP, do I understand?
We will be. That's another job for tomorrow.
Oh, excellent.
We're kind of slowly building up. But yeah, it should be proper 56k dial-up. Fingers crossed.
Awesome stuff. No, it's. I must try and see if I can find somebody with a modem, if only to record the sound of it connecting.
Yeah, exactly.
Which the kids won't understand.
Yeah.
I'm curious just for a minute about coming back to the teletext. Sorry, the view data system. I'm sitting in front of the BBC Micro. Is this the authoring terminal? How's that working? Is it served from a BBC, or is it served from a PC, or is this just working as a terminal?
So the modern system is running on a server in the cloud.
Okay. Right.
The BBC is connected to a genuine modem from the 80s.
Yes, very much so.
And that's dialing via a telephone line to another modem at the other end, and then it's connecting to this server.
Okay, so you're just using this as a serial terminal. Totally props for using period hardware.
I really like the aesthetic of all this stuff.
No, very much so.
You can get a modern
among friends here.
Yeah, you can get a modern cross-platform client, which works really nicely, but it doesn't give you quite the full aesthetic.
No, that sounds good. Now here's a question: which dial tone do these have? Because to me, an analog telephone isn't an analog telephone unless it has the brrr sound of the mechanical thing.
Yeah,
have you got the anemic beep?
Yeah, unfortunately it's the later one, yeah.
Oh, sadly, never mind.
Unfortunately, the gear is from a large manufacturer I won't mention the name of, but they're very US-centric, so a lot of the GB and UK stuff is a bit of an afterthought. Have you had problems with it supporting pulse dialing? That's certainly something I've known from some of the cheaper voice over IP boxes. Is it built in? Pulse dialing supported and built in, so you can call a number from an old-fashioned pulse phone, and it's quite forgiving. So some of the other adapters, it's very strict, and if your dial's a bit old and not quite accurate anymore, they get not lubricated you'll struggle. But this seems to cope pretty well. Okay, I must try the old trick with dialing by tapping the rest. Yeah, exactly. That's one from back in my student days. I learned how to do that. Yeah. Is there anything else people are doing with it that we haven't touched on? I mean, there's so many things you can do with a phone line. It depends how creative the people at the camp are. I can't think of any projects directly interfacing with the kind of copper telephone network. Oh, what a shame. But someone has provided an API where you can generate your own sort of sounds and make something interactive that way. Oh, that's fun. Someone's got a number for cat fact, so you can call up and get a cat fact, and just things of that nature. There's a couple of numbers where you call and get rickrolled.
Oh, that's excellent.
So yeah, people have made numbers to dial into.
Yeah.
I think the other main thing that we've got going is we've actually got a rabbit telephone base station.
Oh, now, wow.
So that's plugged into someone's
Yeah.
camper van, and the coverage is actually pretty impressive. We can get it from the camper van all the way down to the bar, which must be 250 metres or more.
That is impressive to even find one. For the benefit of readers, that's the CT2 system, wasn't it called? This telephone 2.
Yeah, it's a CT2 telepoint phone, yeah.
Yes, I wrote a piece for Hackaday about it probably a couple of years ago. I'll probably link it from the page below the podcast. But that very impressive to find a rabbit base station, because they were everywhere in the 90s and suddenly they've gone.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I mean, they were only around for a year and it kind of flopped. So
yeah, it was
I think they only
dramatic
sold,
failure.
Yeah, they only sold 10,000, so there weren't that many floating around.
As I remember, they charged silly money for them. You could only make outgoing calls near the base station, and along came GSM, which killed it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it really was like a flash in the pan thing.
But I'm deeply impressed that somebody's managed to bring a rabbit base station.
Yeah, they're very hard to find, mostly because if you search on an auction website for rabbit telephone, you're just going to get thousands of rabbit phone cases
or different types of rabbit.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yeah, it doesn't. It's hard to find them.
Yeah, there are probably still plenty of them sort of mouldering in the back of the corner shops that they were installed in.
Yeah, there's still signs on corner shop walls.
I've occasionally seen the odd sign as I've travelled around, certainly. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for telling me about this network.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm going to have to go away and find a phone and try some of those numbers.
Yeah,
now.
good luck.
But thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Once again, a special thanks to Jenny List for all the hard work she put into getting these interviews for us. Honestly, I had figured if she could just get 10 or 15 minutes worth of content, it would have been enough to wrap up into a supplement for the normal podcast, but she really went above and beyond. Now, there's always been a desire to bring as many of the Hackaday team members onto the podcast as possible, which is why co-hosting duties now rotate between Dan, Christina, and myself. But the scattered nature of our roster makes this logistically challenging to say the least. So when we decided to put together this episode using pre-recorded segments, it seemed like the perfect opportunity for some new voices to tell us about their favorite stories and articles from the previous week.
Hi, this is staff writer Al Williams with my quick picks for the week. It's no secret I like to 3D print, but it's also no secret I'm not all that mechanically inclined, so I really enjoyed the simple snap action mechanism as 100% 3D printed post. I'm hoping to be able to rip it off in my own designs. It's not a one-piece print. There were several pieces you had to print to put together, but it looked like a pretty nice snap mechanism that would be easy to reproduce. I was also very interested in the open tool chain for Sapid Tang Nano FPGAs. These are small Chinese FPGAs that have a proprietary tool chain, but now they join the ranks of FPGAs that we have open tool chains for. I'm a big fan of the Lattice tool chain that's been open for quite a while, and so the more open tools we have for working with FPGAs, the more opportunities people will have for working with FPGAs, so I really like that. My last pick this week was one that I actually wrote up about the mysterious nature of glass. Glass has been being made for thousands of years. You would think that we pretty much understand it all, but apparently, according to a post in one of the scientific journals, there's still a lot of mysterious things about glass, from how it's formed to why it has certain properties. And also it was pretty interesting to learn about metallic glass, which they actually make out of cooling molten metals at enormous rates, like billions of degrees per second, and they have some very interesting properties. That's all for this week. I'll see you on Hackaday.com.
I'm Ryan Flowers, contributing writer for Hackaday, and these are my quick hacks. The first quick hack that I'd like to feature is Raspberry Pi Pico replaces PlayStation memory card from Tom Nardi. And in this hack, we have Daniel Giuliani, I'm probably saying that wrong, and I'm sorry, who has come up with a neat way to interface a memory card for a PlayStation 1 with a Pi Pico to turn it into the ultimate storage card for your PlayStation 1. And what I love about this is it takes some basic electronics, a Pi Pico, a little bit of soldering, and turns it into, with an old, probably a dead memory card, hopefully, or a sacrificial memory card, and turns it into something much better. And in fact, it's something that if you were around in the 90s, we would sit around playing on our PlayStations or NES or SNES or Sega Genesis or whatever. And we would talk about, the future, and maybe someday somebody will make a memory card that'll hold all of our games, and for all of our saved games, for all of the games we have, and not just for these few games. We would think about the future and getting rid of these limitations. And here it is, 20, 25, 30 years later, and it's been done with stuff you can just go buy online and hack together. So for that, I love it. It's a glimpse into the future from the past that just touched on that nostalgia nerve just a little bit. Next up is The Secrets of the Pop Pop Boat from Adam Fabio. So I actually wasn't familiar with the Pop Pop Boat until I watched this video and read this article. And the Pop Pop Boat is cool because it looks like a simple steam engine. It's got water in it. It's got a fire underneath it, a little candle underneath it. And you think it's just creating steam, and the steam goes out and it makes a little pop pop sound and whatever, but that's not it. There's more to it than that. In fact, there's fluid dynamics involved. There's resonances involved. And at first glance, it looks to have more in common with like a Stirling engine or a steam engine, or even one of those open-ended pulse jets that relies on the resonance of the pipes in order to fire. But it's just not what you think it is. And that's what I love about it. And the explanation of it. The maker of the video, Steve Mull, went all to the point of making custom glass enclosures that are just beautiful and give you a see-through model of what these pop-pop boats are doing. And it's not even what he thought they were doing. And last but not least, Ask Hackaday, is bigger email better, from Al Williams. I loved this article because email is a subject near and dear to my own heart. I've been working in the web hosting industry for over 20 years, and email is one of the biggest pain points in that industry. And I have learned huge amounts about it. And clearly Al has too, because this original content article is extremely well done. And I have a feeling Al may have lived through a part of this that I didn't. But it talks about how email was invented, back in 1971, and how it gets transferred, and how it's ripe for abuse. And it really is, because as he mentions in the first paragraph of the article, that email was first made for ARPANET, the predecessor to Internet, back in 1971. And I actually left a comment on this article because, again, a subject I'm very familiar with. The first people who used ARPANET were researchers who knew each other or who knew of each other, who they had a level of trust there. And so there was no need for, fancy authentication hoops that we jump through now to make email go through. Everything else has been added on. In fact, SMTP was just an extension or a rewrite, a repurposing of, a hack of FTP, moving files around. Instead of moving just any file, it was these really specially formatted text files that made up email. And so there was these protocols to send it. There were programs to create the email and send it. There was another program to read it. And so email, everything that's been added on since then, whether it be autoresponders or email attachments themselves are a hack. In fact, that's brought out later in the article where it talks about the weight of history here. In order to get a binary file through email, it has to be converted into text, and the best way to do that is base 64 encoding. And base 64 encoding takes, let's say a 30 megabyte binary file and turns it into a 40 megabyte text file. And that gets appended to your message when you send it. So the question that Al poses here is, how do you send large files? Should email take bigger files? Do you think email is on the way out? And my answers there are you should send large files up to 25 megs through email. That's fine. Past that, you should use something else. Do I think email is on the way? It should take bigger files. Absolutely not, by the way. And do you think email is on the way out? Unfortunately, no. However, there's an interesting thought that it already is on the way out or has been out for a long time if you're a Gmail user. Because when you really think about it, Gmail has more in common with an instant messenger than it does email. When you click send on an email in Gmail, it pops up instantly on the other end. And I don't think that's a normal email behavior. Of course, once it leaves the Gmail ecosystem, it definitely is just plain email. Anyway, so for that reason, and because of my passion about email and my opinions about email, that was definitely one of my favorite quick hacks.
Quick hacks. Special thanks to Al and Ryan for answering the call when we asked if any of the contributors were willing to send in a little pre-recorded segment. For the record, Ryan did warn me that his email rant was going to run pretty long. I suppose I could have cut him down there, but honestly, have you ever heard anybody so excited about email before? I thought it was awesome. Showing that kind of passion about something as mundane as email is what we pay these contributors for. Good for you, Ryan. Fly on, you beautiful butterfly. So that's all for this week's special edition of the Hackaday Podcast. Hopefully I pushed all the right buttons, and this arrived on your listening device of choice without any serious issues. As always, if you've got comments, ideas, or just want to make a new internet friend, you can write to editor@hackaday.com. If you see anything cool or do anything cool, send it in to tips@hackaday.com, and you can find the show notes for this and all previous episodes at hackaday.com/podcast. And until next week,
wherever your next adventure takes you, keep on hacking.
Minä siis näin, minä annan mieli kyllä. Haluan.